Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 3, text 27. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate prakrite kriyamanani prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudatma ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate kartaham iti manyate prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate prakrite of material nature, kriyamanani, being done, gunai, by the modes, karmani, activities, sarvasha, all kinds of, ahankara vimudha, bewildered by false ego, Atma, the spirit soul. Karta, doer. Aham, I. Iti, thus. Manyate, he thinks. Translation. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there is a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. Translation okay? Huh? No? Louder. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesha, or the master of the senses of the material body, for due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. How many people are here first time? Quite a few. Okay. This material body is the basis of our existence. In fact, we are mainly concerned with our material bodies because we think that these bodies are the performer of activities and that the results of activities performed with this body belong to me. But in fact, I live within this body as a pure spirit soul, but because I am bewildered by the modes of material nature, I have forgotten that position. It is a question of being covered. And one may understand it in one way. Just like, for instance, if you've got to remember something and you keep it in your mind that you must remember this certain important point. But then you start doing something else and it's very pleasurable or it's very absorbing. One's mind becomes absorbed in it. Then he forgets all about that other thing. Children have this problem sometimes when they're busy playing and the mother says, come home at exactly 5 o'clock. And they're so busy playing they don't care anymore. 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock. For them it's all the same. So these are just some little examples to show one point, that when we are absorbed in a certain kind of activity, even though we know something better, we might forget that due to the conditioning that takes place. In other words, a living entity can come under bewilderment due to the influence of the material energy. The material energy is very big, great, powerful. And we are very small and not very powerful. We are very small spirit souls. The dimension given in the Vedas is about 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. The tip of a hair is very small. And if you take that and you cut that into 100 pieces, then you take one of those pieces, which is now 1/100th the tip of a hair, and you cut that into 100 pieces. You've got 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. And that's very, very small thing. The living entity, the spiritual soul, is very tiny like that. He's called Anu. Anu means atomic. Very tiny. And the material nature, that means all of this energy which we experience out in the material world, this is very great. So we are a very small being existing within a very great material energy. Therefore, we tend to become covered by that material energy. And that covering is called Maya. Maya means that which is not. That which is illusion. It seems to be very important, very real. And it seems that we, the living entity, we are this body. But in fact, this is illusion. I am not this body. I am a spirit soul who's entered into this body temporarily. I may stay in this body for some years only. I have a duration of life which is fixed due to my previous karma. I have earned so many years in this body. Karma means the law of action. That I have acted in the past, and these actions have created reactions, either good or bad, which I must suffer or enjoy in the future. Good actions bring good reactions, bad actions bring bad reactions, and anything in between brings some kind of a mixture. And all of these good and bad reactions accumulate and cause us to accept at the moment of death a new body as we take rebirth again next lifetime. Since we, the spirit soul, are eternal, the spirit soul's quality is, first of all, he's eternal. He's never born and he never dies. He just transfers from body to body to body to body, life after life after life. And he, the spirit soul, although eternal, when he comes into this body, he thinks himself to be simply a product of this material energy. So much so that the scientists have tried to convince us that we are simply a pile of chemicals. The scientific class of men make propaganda that we are just chemicals because they're so much bewildered by the body that they can't see beyond the body. They cannot see spirit, soul. They don't even understand the mind. They are, all in all, simply on a very gross level without seeing anything higher. Now, without getting into the dispute or debate as to whether the body and the soul, whether the soul exists within the body or not, since we are here discussing the Vedic principle, and since it is obvious that life comes from life, not from chemicals, since no one has ever seen life come from chemicals, neither has there ever been an experiment to show life come from chemicals, so we shall assume that everyone here understands at least that basic point, that you're not a pile of chemicals. I think I'm safe in that assumption because I don't think people who think themselves a pile of chemicals come to the Hare Krishna Center on Sunday. It's like the last place you would go if you think you're a pile of chemicals, because this is not the place to come if you are simply interested in gross sense gratification of those chemicals. Generally, those who think of themselves as piles of chemicals, mixed together in some extraordinary fashion, are also very much eager to enjoy this pile of chemicals. So therefore, they spend their time doing other things than coming to the Hare Krishna Center. So therefore, we think we are a little bit safe in this assumption that we can go directly to the discussion of the living entity as pure spirit soul, as we have learned in the Vedic literatures. And actually, we have had experience of change of bodies, life after life, but we've simply forgotten it. But some, they have the ability to remember previous lives, or we have a feeling, because we know the experience of change of body, we have some feeling there naturally that yes, I'm not going to die when this body dies. My consciousness shall go on, transferred now into a new body, according to the law of karma. So this is a good understanding. But there's even a more advanced understanding that one must come to in order to understand factually the relationship between the material and spiritual existence. Because when the spirit soul exists within his body, he is, even if he understands that he's a spirit soul in the body, that does not make him now liberated and free. There's still action which is going on. He still has to act. After all, the body has to be maintained. It is not that in spiritual life, practically in any process that is acceptable nowadays, proclaims that you should neglect completely the material body. There are certain kinds of yoga processes which are not performed in the Western world, and most likely will never be performed in the Western world, which totally negate the desires or needs of the material body. They take up very great austerities, completely neglecting the body, not feeding it, not doing anything with it, simply meditating in one place and caring nothing for the material body, until finally the body drops and they are able to attain liberation. But this is too ferocious. Neither we will do it, neither you will do it, neither anybody else is going to do it, and neither it is recommended as the program in this age of Kali. So therefore, that we won't speak about. Now, the real discussion is based on, well, I have to maintain the body, therefore I must act within this material world. So that brings about some problems. Because as soon as I've got to act, the problem of attachment develops. I can become attached to the fruits of my action. Whenever you do something, you become potentially qualified to be attached to the fruits of the action. Like when somebody works, he wants to get some money, salary. That's the fruit of action. He will not work unless the salary is there, because he is attached to the fruit. Or another person will perform some kind of activity, artistic or poetic or whatever, but there must be some fruit of that activity which we directly or indirectly enjoy. So, the living entity is addicted to these fruitive activities. And therefore, to know the nature of this material world, to know the process which creates attachment, is very important in order to avoid this attachment. In order to avoid having to be captured by the material energy. Because attachment means you're captured by the material energy. Yeah. One is attached to some kind of form of sense gratification. My senses want to be gratified. The eye wants to see, the ear wants to hear, the tongue wants to taste, etc. And one becomes attached to these different forms of the senses. And the material nature keeps us in bondage because of that. So, to know the nature of matter and to know the requirement of the living entity to release himself from matter is a primary thing to understand in spiritual practice. Therefore, this verse is very important. In fact, it's one of the pillars of Bhagavad Gita, because it explains clearly in a very short verse, shloka, exactly what is the problem we are faced with here. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. In this material world, the material nature is called Prakriti. Prakriti means energy. And specifically, we are dealing with the Apara Prakriti, which means the material energy, which is based on Bhumi, Apo, Anala, Vayu, Kam, Mana, Buddhi, and Ahankara, which mean earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are a type of classification of all the material gross elements. You can classify them in thousands of different ways. This is the Vedic way of doing it. And mind, intelligence, and false ego, these are the subtle classifications. And the whole material existence is working on the interaction between this gross and subtle matter in relationship to the spiritual energy, that is the soul, within bodies made of gross and subtle matter. In other words, I'm within this body, and this body is made of gross and subtle matter. But it is powered by me, the spirit soul, who gives it the energy of life. So, prakrite kriyamanani, things are being done in this material nature. All the time things are happening. We can understand in terms of the material energy, okay, in this room some lights are emitting some light energy and also some heat. And the fan is turning, blowing some air around. Things are happening. Flames are burning there on the lamps. Some fuel is being consumed, some chemical reactions taking place, some other byproduct is being created. We are breathing in, consuming free oxygen in the air, replacing it with carbon dioxide. All kinds of transformations are taking place in the lungs, metabolic transformations. Digestion is going on, or maybe it's not yet going on. It will very soon. And various transformations are taking place chemically. Things are happening. But these things can be specifically and totally explained in terms of the material energy alone. It is simply the material energy, made of material elements and ingredients, which are relating here. Even all these reactions within my body, they are all taking place just from the point of view of the material energy. Now, the problem is stated within. Gunai karmani sarvasha. It all takes place by the material modes of nature. However, ahankara, vimudatma, heavy word. Vimudatma. I will explain it, but it's a heavy word. Kartaham iti manyate. Ahankara means false ego. Now, we may have been trained up to think ego means pride. No, ego does not specifically mean pride, but pride is a product of ego. Therefore, the two came to be known to be related in everyday language. Ego, in Latin, where the word comes from, means identity. Ego means what I am. And false ego means what I am not, but what I think I am. In other words, I think I'm the body. But that's called ahankara, false ego, because I am not my body. I think I'm the body. That's my mistake. Therefore, it's called false ego. There are many forms of ahankara. It's like if one says, I am man, the other says, I am woman. It's not so. You are not man, you are not woman. You are spirit soul, but your body is definitely man, or your body is definitely woman. In fact, the whole world is going around on this principle of man and woman. So it's not a question that we can dismiss the bodily differences, because they are, after all, the basis upon which everything works in this whole world. Yeah. But I, the spirit soul, am not male or female, as referring to this body. It is the body alone which has the male or female feature. The spirit soul may be something completely different than what this body is. The spirit soul is definitely different than what this body is. Yeah. And I am neither tall nor short, fat nor thin, smart nor stupid, rich or poor, black or white, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, or Jew, American, Swede, German, Finn, Russian, Chinese, Mongolian. These are all bodily designations of life which have nothing factually to do with me, the spirit soul. You can see here how this philosophy gives the seeds of the real United Nations. Yeah. Whenever I'm in Vienna, I always make it a point to speak about the failure of the United Nations. Because instead of uniting nations, it simply collects more flags out front. Nobody's united because the separate nations are still there. All the flags are still there, one after another. And more of them appear as nations split up more and more. We find nothing uniting about this business. Why? You go into the meetings also, you'll find nothing uniting, as everybody disagrees all the time. The one thing that you agree on is to disagree. That everybody will agree on, how to disagree. Now, that is because there is no real platform to agree on. Because everybody in this material world has so many differences of opinion, differences of needs. The real platform to agree on must be beyond all these material platforms. Therefore, when we understand that we are not of this nation or this body or even the mind, but rather these things are external to us, then at that time we can actually begin to understand what is United Nations, what is brotherhood. Actually, when Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is placed in the center, we find that all living entities are related to Him. Just like there are so many religions in the world, who all accept there is God, and we are related to Him. They may have different opinions over what He is, but at least they understand there's a Supreme. And they think of Him as the Father. Many times they think God the Father. We do not think of God the Father. We think of God the Source, the Supreme. And we are the servant. Because sometimes when you think of Father, you think of Father as a gimme object. You say to the Father as a child, Daddy, give me this. Daddy, give me that. I want this. And if you don't get, you make a whole scene. So, God the Father means God the order supplier. I want this, and this, and this, and this. But we think of the Supreme as the one whom we should serve, because He's the greatest, and we are the smallest. Therefore, we must serve Him. Krishna, of course, is also smaller than the smallest. That's another of His qualities. He's infinite, both infinitely small and infinitely great. Everything in between, too. Since He is the absolute truth. And every single living entity is related to him because he's the source of all of us. Therefore, there can be some actual united nations, united brotherhood, because everybody is related to the same point, whether they know it or not. Of course, when they know it, it makes life a lot easier. If they don't know it, well, we can have all kinds of troubles. So, the ahankara principle means you don't know anything about either yourself or the Supreme whom we are all related to. And one thinks, I am my body. And my body may be a product of this country, Sweden. Therefore, I am Swedish. That is my identity. If I am man, my identity is I am man, Swedish man. And if I am old, I'm old Swedish man. And if I'm rich, I'm a rich old Swedish man. And if I'm fat, I'm a fat rich old Swedish man. In this way I build up my identity, what I am. And it gets more detailed too. Well, how did I become rich? Well, I own Volvo. Is that possible? All right, let's just say it's possible. I don't know. So I'm a fat, rich, old Swedish man who owns Volvo. Therefore, I'm very great. I develop my identity like that. In other words, according to my external appearances, external dress of the body is an external dress. I develop my idea of what I am. That's called ahankara. Ahankara principle means I am my external identity only. This body. Therefore, Krishna says, vimud atma. That's the heavy word. Now to explain why. Mudha means a big ass. Now, why does Krishna use the word ass? Well, he doesn't just use the word ass. He uses the word vimudha, which means a really big ass. Somebody who just doesn't understand anything. Like an ass. Mudha actually means a big fool. But the word ass is used to describe those creatures who will carry huge loads on their back in India, even though they get nothing for it. There's some grass at the end of the day. But the grass you can get anywhere. But because they're foolish, they accept this position of carrying big load just for some grass, which they can get anywhere. Therefore, it's a perfect example. It means somebody who doesn't think very deeply, dull, foolish, childlike. All these are synonyms for mudha. Although childlike also infers or implies some kind of innocence. But when you're an ass, it doesn't imply innocence. It just means no brain, which is about the best final bottom line translation for mudha. Vimudha means really foolish. Why? Because that soul, atma, or that person, vimudhatma, he thinks I am the doer of all these activities. Kartaham, iti manyate, means he thinks like that. Kartaham means I'm the doer. Now this is not an obvious point. And almost all of us would be in the category of vimudhatma, even though it might hurt our opinion of ourselves. Our false ego may feel pain to have this sharp arrow of criticism enter into it. But in fact, we are all. Even if one is engaged in spiritual life, still he's victimized by this habit. He's conditioned by previous understanding. Therefore, he's got a habit developed that I'm the body. And it appears now and then, perhaps more often than we'd like to admit. But all of us are in the category of vimudatma. Why? Before anybody gets too insulted. Why are we all in that category? Because we're here in this material world. As soon as you've got a material body in the material world, you fall into the category of vimudatma. Because only those who have no brain come here to this world. So we are all equally qualified in that respect. Except some are trying to do a lot to get out of this material world. Therefore, they develop a little more qualification. But anyone who thinks he is the performer of activities, he is the one who creates the fruits of his activities, he's in illusion. Because all of these things are factually done by nature. The material nature. It is the material body which is relating to the material ingredients according to our previous karma. And the spirit soul within, he's trying to deal with all this. But he's basically controlled in almost every respect. We say almost every respect because there is one area where we are not controlled. And that is what makes this life our own. What makes our responsibility for our activities our own. And that is that we all have the responsibility to answer for our actions because we perform our actions according to our own choice. Not all the time, not completely, but basically. All right, let's explain that a little more. It is my choice right now to sit here and speak about Bhagavad Gita. I could, conceivably, by my own choice, pick up this book stand, calmly fold it up, grasp it in my right hand, raise it in a menacing fashion above my head, and beat you with it. I could do that, you know. It's not very heavy. Some of you aren't that far away. I could really do it. It's no problem. But I wouldn't do that. At least I'm sure I wouldn't do it. Why? Because that's not nice to do. Not good to go around beating people on the head. After all, how would I like it if they beat me on the head, which they probably will do, right after I beat them on the head. So knowing well that I don't like to be beaten on the head, I don't like to beat anybody else on the head either. But I could do it. What keeps me from doing it? Well, there are many things which keep me from doing it. But one of them is my own choice not to do it. Now you may say, well, what do you mean one of them? Well, I say there are many things. There's more to this than meets the eye. For instance, if I look over here to this young man and I think of beating him on the head, the first thing I might think is, well, he looks bigger than me. Therefore, if I beat him on the head, he may beat me on the head. So I better not do it. Second point, I look and I say, but he may go to the police. Then they'll come and take me away. Because it's against the law to beat somebody on the head. So practically I should not do it because it may be dangerous immediately to me. And socially I should not do it because it may be more dangerous to me in the future when he makes a court case against me. And besides that, what will my friends think? Here are these friends, and they will think, what, is he crazy? Hitting him on the head with the book stand? So I'll have to live with that too. And I don't want my friends to think like that. So that's another thing. Besides fear and the fear of immediate physical danger, besides fear of the law, I have to fear losing my friends or looking like a fool. I also have to fear losing my money. Because when I beat him on the head and he starts bleeding and he has to go to the hospital, I'm going to have to pay the bill ultimately. Because it's my fault. So we can understand there are many, many factors which keep me from doing this insane act. It's not only just my choice. My choice is a product of all of the different factors which enter into the activity. And those factors are all a product of the material energy. In fact, all I'm really choosing to do is, I'm choosing not to do something which is going to cause me a lot of trouble. So that's not a very big choice. Because what if I could get away with it? For instance, a thief, he thinks, I can also beat him on the head and take all his money. And if I beat him on the head hard enough, he'll lay on the floor and won't know it. Then I can get away with it. So he won't beat me because I'll beat him harder and he'll lay on the floor. The government won't catch me because they'll never know who did it. They never catch anybody anyway. I'll get no economic problem. In fact, I'll make a lot of money. And my friends don't have to know about it. And if they did, they'd probably pat me on the back because thieves live amongst thieves. So because he's got a different set of surrounding environmental conditioning, to him the choice to do it is much clearer. He should do it from his point of view. From my point of view, I would never do such a thing. From his point of view, he would definitely do such a thing. So to understand the choice involved is basically like that. One person is thinking about his own self-interests in one way, and another person is thinking about his own self-interests in another way. I'm interested in getting something for this body by beating him. Another is interested in not getting trouble for the body by not beating him. So what's so spiritual about all of this? Nothing. It's all material from top to bottom. But down deep there's some little tiny little choice there, where one says, I want to follow law, the other says, I don't. A little tiny choice is there, where one individual will say, I want to follow the path of righteousness. Another individual will say, I want to follow the path of profit alone and I don't care how to do it. The ahankara principle is very deep. And even when you're making the choice between righteousness or sinful activity, still, it's so much covered with the material energy, with all of the different conditions which are there, that basically we are bound up by material nature from top to bottom. Bound up by our own bodies, by the strength, the youth, the energy, the sickness or the health, the beauty or the wealth. And we are bound up by our own minds, how much our own mind can take. The fear appears in the mind alone. Or we're bound up in our social conditioning, our society, friendship, and love. We are bound up hand and foot. Tepi satantiam urudamni buddha. Wrapped up with ropes of the material nature, which are keeping us very, very tightly under control. One who thinks of himself as completely free is completely in illusion. One who thinks of himself pretty much free is also pretty much in illusion. Practically speaking, one who knows the nature of the material world knows well that we're not free at all. We're like dogs on a leash being dragged around by the master of the material energy. And we follow the dictations of this body, mind, and all the atmosphere around us. Therefore, those who think that they are the doers of activities are also in illusion. Why? Because factually it is the material energy which is dictating to us. We're just like slaves. And in fact, the body itself, with all of its activities, is working under the direction of all kinds of chemical reactions. On this level, we agree with the scientists. The body is a bunch of chemicals, reacting strictly according to the chemical laws. Organic chemical laws. And this creates a very nice scenario for us to understand how we are bound up. One who really understands the nature of the body, the nature of nature, understands that we are a small, tiny, infinitesimal portion, or a small, tiny, infinitesimal something which is being battered around by the material nature like a ping pong ball. Sometimes with some spin, sometimes whack, a real quick one, sometimes a lob. The material nature is hitting us around in different ways. Sometimes harder, sometimes softer, sometimes very elevated and glorious. But one comes back again and whack! Gets the reactions of all of his previous activities. The material nature is playing with us as we play with it, as if we were the controllers. That is the illusion. We think we're controlling, but in fact nature is controlling. Therefore, vimud atma. Now we can understand that we are big fools. So we should not be insulted that Krishna has used this word. He's used it with deep knowledge because he's the one who created the material energy. And he knows how we, the living entities, are using that. It is not that he's making us stay in the material nature. It is not that Krishna is the reason why we are in Maya, in illusion. No. We are the reason why we are in illusion. We ourselves are the cause, because we agree to stay in illusion. To make the choice to get out of this illusion means you take the choice to actually try to become Krishna conscious. That's what the word means. Becoming Krishna conscious means that I am now making the choice to break free from the control of the material energy. I now consciously make the choice to elevate myself beyond the bondage of matter. That is my choice. And that choice must be made by me, the soul. That is the specific freedom of the spiritual soul. He makes the choice to be covered or not. He makes the choice. I wish to be an illusion. I want to be this body. I want to enjoy this material nature. It's his choice. And he also makes that choice. Now I want to be freed from illusion. But it's not just so simple as that, where we simply say, now I want to be freed from illusion. All right, well, yeah. Now what? Yeah, that's a good question. Now what? You can't just decide, now I'm going to be free from illusion, and go to the nearest cupboard and pull out a can of freedom. It's not so simple like this. Or turn on the TV, the Liberated channel. It doesn't help. One has to have some program, some process in order to actually become freed from illusion. And that is where Krishna enters into the picture. When we, the living entity, have a little sincerity like that, where we've realized from our experiences and from hearing proper knowledge that we should actually try to understand how to get out of this material existence. Even if we have this idea only a small degree, Krishna helps us by sending us to a spiritual master or a spiritual master to us. Krishna helps us by connecting us with that person who has the ability to gradually elevate us out of the miserable condition of ignorance. The spiritual master, it is said, forces open our eyes with the torchlight of knowledge, because our eyes are just slammed shut by ignorance. It's like when you're sleeping very deeply in the unconscious state. The eyes are just, boom, shut tight. And when one is woken up, the spiritual master, he does it by waking us up with the torchlight of knowledge, illuminating those eyes which were darkened by ignorance and unconsciousness, waking us out of our slumber of material existence. So the spiritual master performs that service when Krishna arranges that the living entity shall come and hear about Krishna consciousness. And so Krishna helps us come freed from the material ignorance. But still choice is there. Krishna, we have a saying in English, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make him drink. You have that in Swedish? You can bring the horse to the water. You can say, here horse, here's water. Yeah? You can stick his nose in it. Drink, drink, horse. But if he doesn't want to drink the water, he's not going to open his mouth and drink. You can't force him. Especially horses. What are you going to do? Rip open his teeth? Drink now. He'll bite your hand. You cannot force him to drink. You can bring him to the water. You can explain to him, this is water, drink it. But whether he drinks it or not, that's up to the horse. So you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You can bring a living entity to Krishna conscious atmosphere, a Krishna conscious temple. You can't make him join. You can't make him say, yes, now from today on I'm going to declare war against the material energy. I'm going to actually become Krishna conscious, realize who I really am, spirit soul, part and parcel of the Supreme. Eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. But that can't be forced. Nobody can force you to think like that. That is choice. It must be done by choice. So the Krishna sends. Come on, go in here. Spiritual master may speak from the Bhagavad Gita, which is Krishna, the original spiritual master, speaking to all of us. But whether or not we take is another choice. We made a choice to come. Now another choice has to be made. How much we're going to take of that. Whether we're going to take it very seriously, or maybe not so seriously. Maybe we think, I'll come back next week. Or maybe we think, I'll come back tomorrow. There are different thinkings going on. These are formulated by our choices. What we want. So Krishna is there to help. The Vedic literatures, which have come from Krishna, are there to help. And spiritual master is there to help. All the devotees are there to help. Prasadam, spiritual food, which is just now coming, is there to help. Everything's there to help. That's what this whole Krishna consciousness movement is all about. Srila Prabhupada, he brought this movement from India to the Western world 20 years ago. Just with the thought of helping us who were blinded by the ignorance of illusion. Because we all are thinking that we are the performers of our activities. We all are thinking that we are this body. We all think of ourselves as very great, controllers and enjoyers in this material world. And therefore we're all in Maya. And therefore we're all called vimudha. Pretty foolish. So, one requires a little humility in order to accept these points. Because generally when one hears how foolish he is, he thinks, come on. You may be foolish, not me, I know. I'm aware of what is, I have everything under control. Ha! Control your death, my dear sir. Can you control your old age? When your teeth want to fall out, you can stop them? When your liver doesn't want to work anymore, you can make it work? Digest your food even though no digestion is taking place? Can you prevent your body from being smashed to pieces as you're driving into that bridge, having slidden off the road on the icy day, going 140 down the Autobahn? Oh, great controller of the material world. No, but this always happens to the other fellow. It never happens to me. We just drove up from Gothenburg this morning. And on the drive, we saw minimum 3 accidents with everything smashed to pieces. But everybody who passed by, including us, thought, this only happens to the other fellows. Of course, I have a little experience about that mentality, so I always got on the case of the driver. Learn that lesson. Learn that lesson. And the drivers, they always go, yes, yes, and forget all about it. Because it only happens to the other person. It doesn't happen to us. It's like all the young people in the room think, all this old age business, that's for the old people. That's old-fashioned. It doesn't happen to me. Why, I'm eternally youthful. Even though one doesn't formulate the idea like that in his head, he thinks like that. He looks at some old person and he thinks, another species of life. Nothing for me to worry about. No way. Just the old people, they have their old people's homes and do their old people's things, and we're the ones who are actually getting things together here in this world. But soon you shall also be in that condition, forced by the material nature. Then one will be forced to be humble. One may be very proud, but during that time, as the body deteriorates more and more, one's forced to be humble, bent over. Just like the one who's proud has head high, but when one becomes older, crippled with disease, he's forced to bend over, be humble. Although he doesn't want to be humble, he's got to be humbled by the body's breaking down, or humbled by loss of income, or humbled by some girl who just neglects him, or humbled by his friends or family or nation or society in times of scandalous activity. So many ways one is forced by the material nature to be humbled. Not that everybody will be humbled in all these ways, but everybody will be humbled by death. But think how nice it will be when one becomes a little bit humble, understanding himself in truth to be a very small particle of spiritual energy, and in fact a servant of the Supreme. When we hear these words, servant of a Supreme, our training makes us think immediately, oh, how horrible. Servant. Oh. I'm not servant. I'm master. Master of what? What is it that I'm master of? Well, let's examine it. Am I master of my body, or am I servant of my body? What to speak of the nation, the society, etc. Everybody knows we're not master of the nation. We're all servant of the nation in different ways. Same in the community. And in the family, which person is there in Sweden, either man or woman, who will publicly proclaim themselves master of that family? Big trouble. You try that. Just make an experiment amongst you husbands and wives out there. One day the husband can proclaim, I'm the master of this family. See how far he gets. Let's just forget about all those points. Let's talk about the body itself. Who's the master of this body? At least we should be able to be master of our own bodies, even if we can't be the master of very much else in this world. But even that's impossible. Just see how we're all forced to serve the body by blinking the eyelids. Okay, master, stop blinking. It's such an annoyance, isn't it? You're trying to look at something you can't because all the time all these blinks are going on. Big master, control that. And eating, all the time eating, getting fatter and fatter even though one doesn't want to, especially when one hits certain ages, the fat content increases. So, master, stop eating. And if one is too fat, oh master, reduce it by one's own skill. If one is such a master, make it so that his teeth do not rot, so he shall never have to go to that nasty dentist office. If one is master, make it so that he does not have to work to make money. What are we master of? One may say, well, I can look where I want. Oh yeah? And what if some beautiful girl were to walk in the room right now? All the men could say, well, I can look where I want. The eye says, look over there. Immediately everybody looks over there. Yeah. Or, I can control myself. Sure, then we take some very wonderful thing to eat, smelling very nice, just wafting in the nostrils. Ooh. Then the tongue starts watering. Saliva builds up in the mouth. Swallowing is going on. The mind is thinking, yes, yes. Very good. I'll take one of those. We're not mastering anything. In fact, you can see, practically speaking, that we are controlled by our own senses. Controlled by the nose, the mouth, the ears, the eyes, the tongue, the touch. All these things are controlling us continuously. Forcing us like cruel masters. Eat this, drink this. Yes, my dear senses. We're forced to act helplessly. And there's all these social constraints, etc., etc., etc. We're always serving something. We're either serving our senses, or if one is on the mental platform and the mind is just spinning around, sometimes the mind goes like that, just thinking about so many different things, you can't stop it. All the time, think this, think this, think this. You try to calm it down. Stop thinking, mind. Just concentrate. The mind just keeps on bubbling like a little brook of water just streaming down the mountain. Just bubble, 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 bubble all the time, mind. And how can we stop it? We can't even control our own mind. Songs pop in our head and we just can't get them out anymore. Just rolling around and around and around. Sometimes you can't even sleep at night. You just look at the ceiling and things are rolling in your head. You can't get them out. One turns in this position. Closes his eyes. That doesn't work. Then the other position. The covers fly this way, that way. The pillow move this way, that way. Put it over there. Get up, open the window. Get up, shut the window. The mind is just churning actively. How do we control that? We're servants of the mind as well. Servants of our culture, servants of our family, servants of our bosses at work, or servants of the work itself. serving, serving, serving. That's what we're doing all the time. So why do we get so disturbed if somebody proclaims that we're servants? Again, ahankara, the false ego, illusion. Although we are 100% servants, and we are not at all the masters. Maybe some small mastery may be there. Someone may control a couple of people here or there or whatever. But we are still serving them as we so-called control them. Because if we don't give them something for that, they won't continue. We always have to be giving, giving, giving. We are slaves in various ways. So let's admit it, finally. Let's get this problem over with here. Get rid of this false idea. We're master. Come up with the right idea. We're servant. Now, servant of who? Therefore, servant of Krishna. Now we are servant of Maya. Even if we think ourselves big, big leaders, we are still servants of Maya, illusion. Because it is all based on these various desires of the body and mind. But when we serve Krishna, He is the best master. Master we must have, because after all, we're small. So either we come under the influence of the material energy, or we come under the influence of the spiritual energy. When we come under the influence of the material energy, we are simply suffering. When we come under the influence of the spiritual energy, we are simply enjoying spiritual bliss, which is our nature. Therefore, come out of the condition of suffering. Come to the condition of factual knowledge. That condition, Krishna consciousness, means blissfulness. And one will factually be situated in his perfect position as soon as he realizes he is a servant of Krishna. And that position is very nice. Very nice. We should get to that position as quickly as possible. Because every day more in illusion is one day closer to death. And when death comes, we may not get the facility of this human form of life again. One can degrade and lose that facility. End up perhaps even in human life, but in an uncivilized form, or one form where it has no possibility of understanding spiritual values. There are many dangers in this rebirth business. Therefore, the Bhagavatam, another Vedic literature, proclaims, before the next death, come to the point of self-realization. Come to the point of realization of the Supreme. Come to the point of Krishna consciousness and be happy. Before the next death, make this life the best usage of this body. Make this life the means by which we transform this whole process of conditioned illusion which we have been living in for billions of lifetimes, and situate ourselves in the spiritual atmosphere where we all belong. So take this seriously. Be happy. Gain perfection. Go back home, back to Godhead. This is, after all, the perfection of life. So we are recommending to all to take up Krishna consciousness and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. To take home as many of our books as you can. Read those books carefully. Study them. There's knowledge there which benefits everybody. Come visit us here often, as much as you can, and gain the desire more and more to develop our spiritual life. So this place is meant for you. It's meant for us too. Formerly we were like you. So somebody else said, this place is meant for you. So we came. So that means it's still meant for us too. But it's meant for you especially. Because we could, of course, go live on our farm, our nice farm in Almvik, be very happy outside the city with cleaner air, etc. However, one who would like to have shelter from the material energy should come, stay here for a while in Krishna consciousness. At one of our places, so many places are there. And just take up this very blissful life. You'll never regret it. All right, Hare Krishna.